So thank you, first of all, for having me here. I am firmly on the remove DEI side. From my own research, and I've been following DEI for a number of years, it seems that DEI is not concerned with diversity, equity, and inclusion any more than North Korea is concerned with becoming a democratic people's republic, just because that is what it calls itself. I believe that we need to see past the euphemisms and Orwellian doublespeak that DEI uses to try to justify itself and to spread itself through our institutions and organizations. When I look at what DEI actually does in terms of what it promotes, the policies and procedures it creates, and the outcomes that it advocates for, I don't see an organization or institution dedicated to diversity, equity, inclusion. I see an institution that is dedicated to discrimination, exclusion, and inequality. When they say they are for diversity, what I actually see is they are for discriminating against majority groups and in favor of minority groups on the basis of immutable, job-irrelevant, surface-level characteristics like race and gender. When I see them talk about equity, which is one of the flimsier parts of their of the DEI institution, which is why some organizations have dropped it from their departments, I don't see equality of opportunity. I see forced outcomes based, again, on job-irrelevant surface-level characteristics. And when I see inclusion, I see an emphasis on including what are considered the right people, right being determined not just by having the right surface-level characteristics like race, gender, and sexuality, but also by bowing down to and agreeing to evangelize a certain almost religious worldview. And I want to make that clear because you can be a Black woman in the DEI industry and still be cast out for not going along with what they think. This happened to Dr. Tabia Lee, who objected to some of the discriminatory DEI policies that were happening at the university, where she was a director. She was in a director level position, and they fired her saying that she had internalized white supremacy. And when she tried to defend herself, they said that she was white-splaining. So they were not interested in what she had to say. They were not interested in any justifications, ethical or logical. They just got rid of her. So not only does DEI not seem to care about what DEI says it cares about, it also violates all four types of organizational justice. There is procedural justice, distributive justice, informational justice, and interpersonal justice. These are in the IO psychology literature. So in terms of procedural justice, DEI violates procedural justice by creating and promoting unjust policies and procedures that discriminate against people, again, on the basis of immutable, job-irrelevant surface-level characteristics. They create and promote systems that lead to unjust reward and resource distribution based on surface-level characteristics like race and gender. Then they lie about the effects of these and the intent of these, and they pretend that they are good for society and their employees' well-being and that they are respectful of human dignity. But this could not be further from the truth. Now, there's been a lot written already about how critical theories and so-called woke ideology influence the DEI institution. And although all of those things are interesting and we do need to talk about that, that's not the reason why I'm here today. That's not primarily what my research is concerned with. My research is concerned with the strongest possible justifications for DEI in the best possible way that we could do them. And what I found is that there are three possible theories that might justify some of the most well-intentioned pushes for DEI, and yet even those fall drastically short. In fact, DEI seems to actively sabotage all of these or ignore them completely. So, for example, there is the similarity attraction paradigm. The similarity attraction paradigm says that we tend to be more attracted to people that we perceive as similar to ourselves. And, well, what DEI thinks this means is that we are more attracted to people who are similar to ourselves based on surface level characteristics like race and gender. But this is not what the similarity attraction paradigm actually means. What it actually means is that we are more attracted to people based on whether or not we think they're similar to us. And one of the most major sources of attraction between people are deep level qualities, like whether you agree on opinions, values, beliefs, interests, whether your personalities align or not. There are decades of research to show this is the case, but if you don't believe me, you can also think about sports fans, online fan bases, hobbyists, interest groups, even social justice activists. If you look at them, they are often made up of people of different races, different genders, different sexualities, different gender identities, and yet they are all united in their shared similarities based on attitude and values and beliefs. So similarity in attitudes and deep level characteristics are a much bigger source of attraction between people. It turns out that these also have a heavy impact on the important workforce outcomes that people are concerned with. So, for example, there's a team of researchers who investigated the effects of deep level diversity versus surface level diversity on workplace outcomes like employees, coworker satisfaction, supervisor satisfaction, general job satisfaction, and organizational commitment. Now, DEI would like us to believe that one of the most important factors to people is to see themselves, quote unquote, represented in leadership, like supervisors, represented among their colleagues, and that this will help retain employees if we include all this representation. But it turns out this is not true. Deep level diversity variables have the strongest connection between all of these important workplace outcomes, not surface level diversity. I'll give you an example. In this study, the researchers found that group cohesion had a significant correlation with similarities in values, interests, and personality traits. They also found that over time, deep level diversity mattered more and had a greater impact on workplace outcomes than surface level diversity. So as time went on, deep level diversity mattered more, or deep level similarities mattered more, and surface level diversity mattered less. The researchers also pointed out that even though we may, and I want to emphasize may, initially categorize people or judge them based on stereotypes or past experience, which are not the same thing necessarily, we don't always do this. And when we do, we almost always modify these initial judgments or replace these initial judgments with deeper level knowledge of a person's character once we get to know them better. They concluded by saying that if we really want to help teams get along well, whether they are diverse or not, what we need to do is to encourage rich, meaningful social interaction that goes deeper than the surface level divisions that DEI often overemphasizes. We also need to encourage people to work on meaningful interdependent tasks where they rely on each other to succeed, not sit through trainings on how some people are oppressed and other people are oppressors, and so on and so forth. So the similarity attraction paradigm does not support DEI. Then there's the social categorization theory. The social categorization theory says that we tend to categorize each other as either similar or different to ourselves based on social categories that we perceive are salient. Now, this means whether we think they are notable and important. DEI thinks this means that we categorize other people based on surface level social categories. We do this immediately and we do it over time. And the only way we stop doing this is if we have somebody from their department come in and say, hey, did you know racism is wrong? And then we go, oh, okay, now I know. Well, it turns out that DEI is wrong on this account as well. So a team of researchers was investigating the connection between social category salience and fault lines. Fault lines are hypothetical dividing lines that can divide a heterogeneous group into relatively homogeneous subgroups. So if you have a diverse team in the way that diversity, equity, inclusion typically thinks of as a diverse team, you could divide that group into male, female, black, white, black male, black female, white female, and so on and so forth. So they investigated the relationship between fault lines and social category salience and found that just because groups could be divided along these lines did not mean that people always did so. They did not necessarily find these categories to be meaningful, contrary to what DEI teaches when it says that these categories are not only important, but that people are constantly judging each other based on these social categories. They also found that there is a cost to believing that our social categories are aligned with deeper level characteristics. For example, they found that if people believed their teammates' actions were correlated with divisions into social categories, they exchanged less information with each other. Information elaboration went down. But if they noticed their differences, but they didn't necessarily categorize people's behaviors based on those certain social categories like race and gender, information elaboration increased. And what they took this to mean was that it is fine if we notice each other's differences, maybe even good, so long as we do not correlate those with certain social categories. Again, this is the opposite of what DEI teaches, when it teaches that we can use surface level variables as proxies for deep level characteristics. It doesn't work. So the similarity attraction paradigm doesn't work to support DEI. The social categorization theory doesn't work to support DEI. There's one more theory that could be used, and like the others, DEI does it wrong. It's called the contact hypothesis. The contact hypothesis says that you can reduce prejudice between two groups of people if you make those two groups interact and ideally engage in rich, meaningful social interactions. However, DEI goes about this in the worst way possible because the contact hypothesis only works if 4 key conditions are met. People have to have equal status, they have to engage in cooperation, they have to engage in common goals, and they have to have fair institutional support. So, equal status. How can people have equal status if we are constantly being taught to slot ourselves into an ever-increasing and complicated hierarchy of oppressor and oppressed based on little more than a combination of our surface-level characteristics? We can't engage in equal status like that. When it comes to common goals, how can we engage in common goals if DEI institutions and departments are telling us that we should shift our focus away from whatever unifying mission our organization is expressly dedicated to pursuing and turn us towards evangelizing what is basically a religion of identity-based, an identity-based crusade? That takes away the common goals that could unite us and could make people really solve the world's problems. If every single institution in the world gets DEI scope creep and starts focusing on DEI goals rather than what they're doing, who is going to solve problems related to infrastructure or medicine? So common goals are impossible under DEI, also partly because under DEI, some people are labeled enemies. Doesn't matter what you say, doesn't matter what you do. Even if you are right, they will say you have internalized this, internalized that. When it comes to cooperation, how can we engage in cooperation if we are taught that some people inherently have an advantage, not based on circumstances, not based on freely chosen actions, not even based on economic upbringing, or whether they have 2 parents in the home, or any of the other factors that we know can contribute to a, let's say, advantaged life and a disadvantaged life, but based on immutable surface level characteristics and nothing else. This doesn't set up a culture of cooperation, it sets up a culture of identity-based competition. And finally, there is fair institutional support. How can we say that people have fair institutional support in a way that would help the contact hypothesis work through DEI if DEI is incessantly pushing for hiring, promoting, evaluating, policy, and reward and resource distributions based on job-irrelevant, surface-level characteristics that have nothing to do with the content of people's characters and nothing to do with their competency in knowledge, skills, and abilities? I want to be clear here. We could talk about critical theories and woke ideology, but I think it is useful to add to this discussion the fact that even the most sensible theories that could justify DEI don't work. DEI actively sabotages them, which is why I believe the solution is to remove DEI. Remove DEI departments and institutions and create better, stronger, fairer systems in their place. So, for example, remove all surface-level characteristics and ideological loyalty tests, such as commitments to DEI, from consideration in hiring, firing, evaluating, and reward and resource distributions. Focus instead on unbiased, job-relevant, behaviorally demonstrated knowledge, skills, and abilities. We also need to go back to teaching people that there is no meaningful correlation between people's surface-level traits and the content of their character or the competency of their knowledge, skills, and abilities, and that you cannot use surface level traits as proxies for deep level qualities like attitudes, beliefs, values, interests, and personality traits. DEI, in my opinion, is unsalvageable, and therefore we need to dismantle it and build something better in its place. Thank you.